Are you there, Derek, and can you hear us?
Okay, what are we doing now?
Now, I can see Derek there. Can you hear me?
Here we are at Bilston, the Stewart and Lloyd Steelworks, and with me in the melting shop is the works manager, Mr. Jeff Forster. Mr. Forster, it now looks absolutely certain to you, does it, that Mr. Wilson will carry ahead with his plans to nationalize steel?
I suppose he will do. He's said this. How he's going to do it, of course, is the question.
What's your own feeling about it?
My own feeling is that old-time nationalisation, as we understand it in the past, would be quite disastrous to the prosperity of the industry. And if he goes ahead on that, I think it's quite a disaster for the country. But I think it is quite possible to discuss and sort out some better way of nationalising, better way of organisation for industry, and I hope that this will happen.
But do you think that there's been a change of heart amongst management now in the steel industry towards nationalisation of some kind?
No, I don't think there's been a change of heart. I think it's essential that we have to have a private enterprise element in steel, but steel is such a basic industry that obviously public accountability is important, and there may well be alternative methods of getting this public accountability far short of old-style nationalisation.
But in other words, do you think that the steel industry is reconciled to some kind of nationalisation of public accountability?
I think the steel industry is reconciled and would cooperate in some change in the organisation.
What form would you like to see?
Well, a form of organisation which is being considered at the moment is something similar to the European coal and steel community pattern, where you have two bodies responsible for the industry. At the top, a small, very high caliber, slightly Olympian body who are accountable to the minister, and below that a working body of more people representing steelmakers and customers and unions, and they would be directly responsible for the industry and the working of it. And the important thing is this would take the industry out of politics, and I think that's the most important thing, to get it out of the political cockpit.
How far would this affect and change drastically life for you here at Stewart and Lloyd?
Well, one can only speculate on that. I would expect in the short and medium term that one would not notice any change. In fact, my responsibility here is for the efficient, competitive running of Bilston Works, and whatever happens, that doesn't change. I want to make this an efficient place.
Whatever happens?
Whatever happens. Yes.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Right.
Can I talk to some of the workmen here? Are you happy about the results of the election?
Well, it's been saving too, but
It's been what?
it's been all right. I ain't heard much about it, to tell the truth.
You haven't?
No.
Do you think it's going to affect things here for you at Stewart and Lloyd? It looks now as if Mr. Wilson will nationalise steel. Do you think it's going to make a difference to your life here?
No, I don't think so.
Can you come forward just a moment?
No, I don't think so.
Not at all.
Might improve the pay.
You might want.
Might improve the pay.
You might improve the pay.
That's what you're interested in, really. I think it'll be a good thing if the steel's nationalised anyway.
Do you think it will be a
Yes, allow the profits back into the state. Perhaps increase benefits to one and another. Deserving cases, pensions, old age pensioners, disabled men, servicemen, plough back into them and develop the country as a whole, I think.
You feel that that's what's likely to happen?
I think that's what should happen, anyway.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now, that was Derek Hart at Bilston at Stewart and Lloyd's Works. Now let's go across the far side of the studio, join Kenneth Harris. We've been hearing a lot of foreign reaction from the news. Now we can get some from him. Kenneth?
Well, we've got three very distinguished foreign journalists here.
On my left here is Olivier Todd, Nouvel Observateur of Paris, and on his left is Karl Mayer from the Washington Post, and on his left is Henry Trofimenkov of Moscow Radio. I know you've been studying the campaign and been around the country quite a lot. Do you agree with what most British journalists seem to be saying, that the campaign was rather dull? What about you, Olivier Todd?
No, I don't, and I must say that most French journalists have found it dull. I think that's a very superficial point of view. I think it's American and Latin. It hasn't been a noisy campaign. There were far fewer posters than in 1964. I think some people have found it exciting if the Prime Minister, instead of getting a stink bomb in his eye, had received a bullet or something like that, or if you've had a lot of majorettes in the street. I have found it an extremely serious campaign. Quiet one, but serious.
Karl Mayer?
I think descriptively it's accurate to say it was dull. I don't think that was the significant thing about it. I think there's been altogether too much self-criticism, too much negativism about the election here. On the contrary, I'm quite impressed by the fact that any country that can produce three attractive, able, first-class political leaders like Wilson, Heath, and Joe Grimman, I think that no country has to apologize if it can produce three men like this, and that the state of the British body politic is extremely healthy right now.
Henry Trofimenkov?
No, I can't agree that the campaign was dull, and I was wondering why some American newspapers wrote it's off-key campaign. I think it was rather lively campaign, and maybe it was a little bit dull on the national, so to say, debate, but in the constituencies, it was quite sharp confrontation between the various parties. And also, to a certain extent, of course, the polling yesterday was a little bit dull, and someone would not notice maybe even that the elections are taking place in comparison, say, with the United States.
Tom, this depends on the constituencies. Yesterday afternoon, I was going around Hampstead, which I found very interesting, and I found it extraordinarily active. I mean, there were lots of young people on both sides campaigning and canvassing and getting people out. It was very powerful.
But in my vicinity, in Notting Hill Gate, when there is an early closing day, there was nothing distinguished the day from the ordinary working, so to say, day.
I do have one regret, though. I think that the results will strengthen the awful tyranny of the opinion polls.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
I'm so sorry that they've turned out to be right.
Oh, they haven't. I mean, one
Thank
opinion
God.
poll has disgraced itself completely and is out. Can one mention it or not? No, absolutely not.
Well, quite apart from the campaign, now what do you make of the result itself? Trofimenkov?
I think the result, of course, it was forecast. I think it's quite a natural result in this situation because of the three parliamentary parties. Labour Party was really presenting coherent economic program for Britain, because Britain, to my judgment, needs most of all the modernization of economy, some pushing ahead. And in this respect, the Labour Party stood ahead of Conservative and Liberal parties in presenting some really coherent plan with its attempts to have more government guidance, to give leadership, so to say, to the economy, and to introduce some elements of national planning. And I think this appealed to the voters.
Yeah, but I think there's one thing which is odd to Frenchmen, and that is that the Labour Party as a whole seems more rational, more coherent, more progressive than the Tory party. But Mr. Wilson's personality still remains very, very elusive, even to French socialists. They don't quite know what to make of him. They think that Heath is a European and more looking forward, more forward-looking, but that Mr. Wilson is not doctrinaire enough.
Yeah, could I come back to that in a moment? Karl Mayer?
I was struck by the same thing. You know, Wilson has been compared to practically every prime minister in the past.
Except to Wilson, yeah.
And, and I see that he's gotten the ultimate American accolade, that he was compared to Kennedy in 1964, and now he's being compared to Lyndon Johnson. As to the results, I found myself of very divided minds on it. Looking at British domestic problems, I had the feeling that Labour presented the better case of the two in the sense of offering a coherent policy in the future, and in the sense that the Tories had 13 years and it was time to give the other side a chance. I must say, though, that as an American, I have felt that the Tories in the past have tended to strengthen people in the United States who were for coexistence, who were for a non-Cold War approach to diplomacy. I have been disappointed with what I think has been the excessive, the excessive uncritical attitude of the Labour government to American policy. I say this as someone who thinks that this kind of criticism is useful for the Americans.
In France, this opinion, oddly enough, would be shared by Gaullists and non-Gaullists. Non-Gaullists feel that Mr. Wilson has been very, very weak over Vietnam, and Gaullists also feel this. They're interested in Mr. Wilson's approach to the common market because he's against the supranational business, just like the general. They can't make him out at all, I think, for the moment.
No, what I would like to say is, though, of course, the foreign policy problems were, in a way, excluded from the national debate, nevertheless, in the constituencies, many left-wing candidates criticized the American policy, and I think it helped to Labour to win bigger majority. On the other hand, this exclusion of foreign policy problems from national debate, it also sort of played to the hand of Labour Party. Because though these problems, say, like the disarmament and the decreasing tensions in Europe, were not thoroughly discussed, but by implication, the fact that Mr. Wilson made a trip to Moscow, the fact that during the election campaign he sent Lord Chalfont there, sort of appealed to the feeling of the masses who are striving for peace, and in this way the Labour Party appealed more to the rank-and-file people than the conservatives or liberals.
Yes, I have a vague feeling that Wilson is still in many ways a little Englander, but that he's groping his way towards Europe. Some French papers this morning are suggesting that he might now take a slightly firmer line with the Americans over Vietnam. This is really the big question in France.
Comment?
I think that the point about the exclusion of foreign affairs, that every democratic election focuses on domestic issues. It's very exceptional that foreign affairs become an issue, and in fact, in 1964 in the United States, we had a situation where foreign affairs was an issue, and God save us from another campaign like that. I think that this is not necessarily a bad thing. I am troubled, though, by the fact that on Europe, that Mr. Wilson has not shown which way he wants to go on this. And he represents a coalition of interests within his party, and I think the problem for him is to shape a new consensus on this subject.
One got the impression that the common market issue, when it was raised, was a slight gimmick on both sides, perhaps corresponding to the fact that the English are getting far less insular than they used to be, and that somehow a foreign policy matter had to be brought into the campaign.
What about you?
You see, I can't agree with the fact that as my colleague says, in democratic countries, the elections are waged on the basis of domestic policies. I think we should see what the next American elections, on which ground it would be waged. Well, but what I want to add is that the heavy voting for Labour, to my mind, was a sort of an advance payment to the Labour Party to carry out those promises.
Thank you very much. Then we'll come back and hear a little more from you later. And now back to Cliff. We will indeed. I've just got two pieces of news. Mr. Heath has just announced that he'll be holding a Tory post-mortem in Smith Square this afternoon, together with the chairman of the Tory party, Mr. Edward Buchanan. He'll be summing up his campaign for the past month at a press conference and assess the election results then. And a new MP is in hospital. There was no change today in the condition of Mr. Irvine, who's QC and 56, who's in Sefton General Hospital, Liverpool, after suffering a cerebrovascular incident due to election strain. Mr. Irvine retained his seat for Labour at Edge Hill, Liverpool last night. He was sleeping when the result was announced. And now, let's look at one of the most dramatic moments of last night's results. The moment when Smethwick, which in 1964, you'll remember, became a permanent focus for national and indeed world attention, that swung the other way. Conservative Peter Griffiths, elected in 1964 on what everyone thought was a racialist policy, or so the world thought, loses out in 1966 to Andrew Fold. In Smethwick, Desmond Wilcox talked to both of them.
Go ahead now, Mr. Griffiths. Mr. Griffiths, you've now lost Smethwick, the seat that you gained from Patrick Gordon Walker at the last election. Do you regard this as a personal rejection of your policies which brought you to victory last time?
No, I don't think so. We appear to have had the same sort of swing as elsewhere. I think this is just part of the national trend.
But Smethwick was not part of the national trend last time. Smethwick has always been reckoned to be an odd constituency because of the issues that have been brought out in an election which you fought last time. Now, could it not be said that this time Smethwick has in fact rejected and changed its mind about what it did last time?
Oh no, there would have had to have been a much larger swing against me. We've kept the support we got last time, where the swing here is in line with all the others, so we've kept the people we gained last time.
Oh, Mr. Griffiths, aren't you quibbling with the results somewhat?
No, the swing here is the same as elsewhere, so we've kept the gain we made last time. I'm quite pleased that we've done this, though I'm disappointed that we've lost.
Will you fight the constituency again?
Oh yes, as soon as we can, yes.
Do you think that the issue of race here in Smethwick will be effective as political ammunition in the future?
I certainly hope not.
What do you mean you hope not? It was in the election that brought you to victory, was it not?
No, it most certainly was not.
No. What are you going to do now that you no longer have a living as a Conservative MP?
I'm going to prepare for the next general election.
Are you going to go back to being a headmaster at a local school?
I really haven't given any thought to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths. Mr. Foles, you've won back the seat that was taken away from, I wonder if I can turn you this way.
Yes.
Won back the seat that was taken away from Patrick Gordon Walker. What do you think this indicates about the voters of Smethwick?
I think it indicates that they tumbled, that they had a rather nasty trick played on them last time. The campaign here, the last election, was something that was totally unacceptable in British political terms. And I don't think anybody doubts this. Anybody who's studied the campaign, anybody who knows what went on, accepts this. This time, for reasons that no doubt we'll discuss at a later date, it was a much more honest and straightforward campaign. I think our opponents were probably warned off fighting the same sort of campaign again. And of course, the fact that we've now got something like a 3,500 majority, I don't think Mr. Griffiths has really checked his figures. I think there's been an enormous movement back to Labour. And I would hazard a guess, I haven't checked the figures, he hasn't, I would hazard a guess this is something above the national swing.
Old gentleman, the old walking wearily. I am both. With a hearing aid, you know?
And now, let's go down to Albany. This is where Mr. Edward Heath lives. Presumably waiting for him to come out. I don't know who our reporter is down there, but perhaps he'll go ahead if he can hear me down at Albany.
Reg at the Albany.
Sorry, I couldn't see who it was. We're able with you now.
Mr. Edward Heath's flat is in Albany House here. A few reporters around this morning, a few photographers, but so far no appearance by Mr. Heath. It's felt that he will emerge shortly. He may well go to Conservative headquarters. No one knows. For the moment, we're awaiting the leader of the Conservative Party, Reg Abbas at the Albany.
There we are. I thought he was just about to come out. One thing is sure to happen now. It's 10 o'clock, tea break time at Ford's Works, Dagenham. Fife Robertson.
They've just started the tea break here at the great Ford Works at Dagenham in Essex, and very welcome it is, because these men have to move pretty steadily, everything else doing the same. Come and tell me what you think about the election results. Now, you're the shop steward here, aren't you?
Yes, I'm the shop steward here in this department.
Is it going to affect your life, do you reckon?
I don't think so, no. I don't think it will affect us at all in any way, one way or the other.
But I would have...
Very good result.
Do politics not enter into industrial relations here at all?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, politics doesn't concern me.
No?
I'm not interested in politics. I'm strict trade unionist, and I don't think it's a very...
You have your own politics, mind you.
Yeah.
What do you think of the proposal that there should be a merger of some of the 21 car industry unions? Would you like this?
Yes, I would be very pleased with this. I think the sooner this comes, the better.
How many unions would you like to see in a great place like this?
I would say that in this place here, I would say 3 unions would be ample. One to represent the trade side, and the other 2 to represent the production and non-productive workers.
Would make your job easier, would it?
It would make our job a lot simpler. It would make negotiations.
Job easier too.
It would make management's job easier. It would make negotiations very simple and very quick. Experience is what we want.
Now, how do you boys feel about the result?
Oh, I mean, we're all very pleased with it. We're all shocked because we didn't expect such a big majority.
But why are you shocked, I should think?
Well, I mean,
delighted.
we're delighted in one way, but it's a shock in another way because although we expected Labour to get back in, we didn't expect them with such a big majority.
Well, what's the trouble about a big majority?
Oh, there's no trouble at all. I mean, it's just a shock in one way and happiness in another way.
What do you reckon the Labour government will do now that they're so safely back?
Well, I think now they've really got organised. I think they're really going to this nationalisation problem. They're really trying to steal. I think so. I think in this computer age that we are living in now, I think to safeguard the lads, like myself, I think nationalisation will save it. I mean, if it goes into private enterprise, it'd be...
Wait a minute. Would you say that men working in nationalised industries have done better than men working in a private enterprise firm like this?
Yeah, I think they've got more security. I mean, it's dog eat dog in this type. I mean, as we work...
Not so bad as it was, is it?
No, it's not so bad, but I mean, it is. I mean, they're not running a benevolent society, are they? They're here.
The British Railway.
No.
Come forward and tell me what you think. You look very happy about the result.
I think the best party won.
Best party in what way?
Well, I'm just saying every way, like.
Well, surely not every way. I'd have thought trade unions might be a little bit wary about the proposed trade union legislation. They are a warning bill. What do you think of the Prices and Incomes Board?
Well, same as...
if you had a pay claim coming out, would you be prepared to see it go before the board and abide by the results?
Well, we all got to abide with it whether we want to or not, don't we?
I don't know. You haven't always done that, have you? This is a happier place to work in now, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Has that anything to do with politics? Can you come forward a little so that they hear better? Is that anything... Do politics enter much into labour relations here?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Well, what do you think of the proposals the Labour government has already outlined? The Prices and Incomes early warning bill.
Well, I suppose if Mr. Wilson has got to get the country back on his feet, I suppose he's got to stick by a policy of keep wages down, I suppose, as much as he can.
He'll have a job keeping your wages down, if you think, eh?
Oh, well, I don't think
must be among the best paid manual workers.
Oh, I would. Far from it, I would.
What kind of a rise do you want to satisfy you? And do you think you'll get it under a Labour government? Easier than under a Tory one?
No, I wouldn't think. I wouldn't say that. If we get it under...
Well, look, here's a difficult one. Would you rather see them devote their attention to bringing the lower paid workers up and leave you blokes where you are for a while?
Yes. Yes. Good thing, yes. Especially
now,
the railways.
What about other declared policies? Council rents are tending to go up, aren't they? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think everyone should, like this rate problem, I think everyone should pay a tax regardless where they live or where they work or anywhere. I mean, at the moment, the rate payers and people that live in council houses are being well lumbered, aren't they? Really should. But everyone, I mean, there's people that are in digs, there's single people, they should pay.
This is what a lot of people think. But do you think it's right and fair, as some people do, that if a man can afford it, he should pay the economic rent for a council house?
Yes. I think council house rent should be paid according to the income of the house.
You don't mind a means test there, then?
No, I would not.
What do you, if a Tory government had got in, what would you have been most afraid of?
Unemployment.
Yeah. Unemployment, I think mostly, yeah.
The old stop-go policy again,
Yeah.
Would you say that was much to the fore in the last half of the 13 years?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, where a hell of a lot of things, like where the Polaris missiles, money wasted on these type of things, and where the Ferranti business, the oil field, and where the other scandals, which we won't talk about, but we all know. And, I mean, there's endless things. He helped the sewer taxpayers out. There's always helping the big man out. But we were less than I mean, what happened? Every time we put the credit squeeze on, we were on short time working.
My time's up. This is 5 Roberts at Dagenham.
Now, the credit squeeze, I think, takes us very neatly indeed, because not only do we have our cameras out all over this country, but we're also connected, of course, with Eurovision. Now, I believe this gentleman is going to talk about finance to Kenneth Harris. Kenneth? Mr. Hartman?
Yes?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, it's all right. I understand you, Mr. Harris.
Good. Could you tell us what the gnomes of Zurich make of this election result?
Oh, I think the gnomes of Zurich expected all that Labour Party might get the victory. But I think we didn't expect that they will get such a large majority. It may be interesting for you that the foreign exchanges markets opened about an hour ago in Zurich, and that contrary to some expectations, the pound sterling was slightly firmer than it was yesterday.
You think that reaction is going to be the permanent one there?
I think that will depend mainly what the new government will do. And it will depend perhaps more than in the past even on that.
Why is it firmer? You say yourself that most people would have expected the contrary reaction.
Some people thought that if Mr. Wilson gets a larger majority in the parliament, that he might have some difficulties in his own party and might be obliged to make concessions to the left side of his own party. It seems that the general opinion today is that Mr. Wilson has such a majority that he can carry for a considerable long time a steady policy.
Do you yourself think that he will have to make concessions to the left wing of his party because he's got this large majority?
We all fear that, and including myself.
Now, what kind of concessions do you fear, and why?
Some of the measures the Prime Minister took during the past 1.5 years were not very popular ones, and I think stroke mostly the small men. And it may be that he will have to make concessions with smaller interest rates, especially for housing, that he will have to make concessions for increased wages, and that he will have a deficit in his budget on account of several expenditures he promised during the first election campaign.
Yes, but whatever the Zurich gnomes think of what he did in the last Parliament, he didn't make many concessions to the left. What is it you fear?
I think, on the contrary, we admit and admire even that Mr. Wilson did many things in order to help the British balance of payments and to get the pound sterling firm. Things which may perhaps be more difficult in the future if he has some opponents in his own party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hartman. Now back to you.
Whatever you may have read on your television screens there, that was not Stuart and Lloyd's at Bilston or anywhere else. That was Mr. Hartman, who's a Swiss banker, and he was talking to you direct over the Eurovision link from Switzerland. And now, down to what I think to be one of the most glorious parts of the country, one of my very favourite places, and Tom Salmon's down there. We've got a result. We've got a result.
This, in fact, is an overnight one that came in very late from Northern Ireland. Armagh and the Ulster Unionists have held this pretty comfortably.
The Unionist vote goes up 7% there, but there was a Northern Ireland Labour candidate last time who's withdrawn. The Republican Labour candidate goes up, the Republican candidate goes up 5%.
Just to remind you, the Ulster Unionists have lost one seat in Northern Ireland, Belfast West, overnight.
All right, now we really will go down to Barnstable, to my friend down there, Tom Salmon, who I hope will send me a couple of market bunches. Tom, on the pannier market.
Good morning, and you join us in the pannier market at Barnstable in North Devon, this cross between almost a Victorian railway station and an enlarged church bazaar. It's to this market for 100 years now that farmers have brought their produce, fresh vegetables, flowers, good Devonshire cream. And this, of course, is the Liberal country, Jeremy Thorpe's constituency. There's no... I can even ask you who you voted for, Jeremy again.
Yes, yes.
But the majority was reduced.
Reduced. 3,000 something.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I couldn't say at all.
Disappointed about it?
No, not at all. Not at all.
What about you? What did you think
No, we're
about
not
it?
disappointed, but we know we have a good man, and he'll be with us the next 50 years.
Now, what do you think about the...
Well, I think personally he helped the National Liberals up and down the country more so than he should have. I think he should have stayed more with us.
He couldn't spend as long
He couldn't spend as long as he could. No, I think that's what happened, yeah.
What do you think about this, what looks like being a certain big Labour majority in the country?
Well, as an ordinary working person, I'm very pleased about it.
But you
we can't get the Liberals in, can we?
No, you can't get the Liberals in, but would you be satisfied with Labour?
I think so, yes. We haven't given them a chance yet, have we?
You're not a bit worried that the socialism may be a bit heavy?
No, I'm not, no.
You just don't like the Tories in this part of the world?
No, I don't like the Tories. I never have.
This is the point.
Quite right, yes, quite right.
Well, let's move across to the other side of the market, and we seem to be blocking the gangway here. It's pretty crowded here this morning. What do you think of the Labour majority over the country?
Well, from my own personal point of view, I don't, it's not my political view, really. I am really a Conservative, and I don't think it'll be a good thing for the country.
Why don't you think it'll be a good thing?
Well, I'm an ex-naval man, and I've been served in the Royal Navy since 1906 until 1929. I don't like the attitude of doing away with aircraft carriers or reducing the Navy as such, because by having a strong Navy, we shall be employing men to man the ships, and the ships will have to be built in shipyards where I have been connected for over 40 years.
What about you, sir? What do you think of this? Looks like being a sweeping Labour win.
Well, that's exactly what the national opinion poll forecasted, really, isn't it? But here in this constituency here, I think Mr. Thorpe has lost a great deal of these supporters in votes because he has been sitting on the fence on this overspill development.
Oh, this has been a big issue here, you think?
It certainly has. And Mr. Kegwin, the Conservative candidate, he's definitely come out against overspill.
And do you think the people in North Devon generally are against the possibility of London overspill coming down here?
Well, on a poll that was taken here by an overspill resistance movement, there was 12,000 signatures against overspill development.
Yeah. Why do you think Mr. Thorpe lost some of his vote? Well, not his vote, but the majority is reduced here.
Well, I think the main reason was that he had so much cover throughout the country. He didn't spend a lot of time in Barnstable.
But he was, in fact, one of the national figures.
He was one of the national figures.
Yes.
But on the whole, he's an excellent fellow. He's doing a good job in this area. Very likeable.
What do you think of the national picture? It looks like being 100 majority or over.
Well, it gives Mr. Wilson a chance to carry on his programme, and we shall see what happens. He may make a good job of it. If not, well, people will know what to do in the next election.
But it'll probably be 5 years before they get this opportunity.
Yes, it
are
will
you
be.
Perhaps in a sort of liberal constituency such as this, are you a bit afraid that the socialism may be a bit strong, a bit undiluted?
I don't think so. As long as they don't nationalise too much.
If it wasn't going to be a Liberal government, as obviously it wasn't, would you prefer a Tory one or a Labour one?
I think a Labour one, because it gives Mr. Wilson a chance to carry on his programme that he started.
What sort of things do you think Wilson ought to concentrate on?
Well, it seems that in his manifesto, he's very much for nationalising several industries. This, in my own personal opinion, I'm very much against. I like to see free trading wherever possible.
What about you on nationalisation? Afraid of it or not?
I don't like it at all. I'd rather, as my friend here says, private enterprise every time. I don't agree. I mean, say, if they could prove that nationalisation was paying, such as railways or mines or anything like that, then yes. But it's not. It's failing, isn't it? It's costing you more for your coal, or I more for your coal, and more for your train fares, wherever you travel. I would say, certainly we must have these things, and I don't see why they should be nationalised at all.
What about you? What's your feeling about this overall result? Not this constituency one, but the Labour win throughout the country.
Well, I would much rather see a Liberal balance of power. I think a Liberal influence on both parties is a good thing. It keeps them on their toes. Instead of bickering among themselves or becoming, with a really big majority, they become very lax and they can push anything through they like. They get very lackadaisical. It's a bad thing. But with a very narrow majority and with a good, strong Liberal influence, they can keep them on their toes and keep them at it.
Well, you too, although you're not wearing a badge which says I like Jeremy, it's obviously the way you think. But given an alternative, either a socialist government or a Tory one, which would you have gone for?
Very hard to say. I would tend towards the Tories. But again, I'd much rather see a very strong Liberal influence, whichever way it goes.
Why do you think the Liberal influence in this part of the world seems to have been diminished? Your friend was saying the possibility of overspill.
Well, the overspill issue is a very live issue here. The overspill resistance movement did try to keep it out of politics, but it was brought in. Jeremy has, to many people, sat on the fence. Tim Kegwin came out positively against overspill. A lot of people, this appealed to them, and they've obviously voted for him.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all very much indeed. And this is Tom Salmon, the pannier market at Barnstable.
Nice too. But before we go on, Ian, you were saying how interested you were in some of those remarks.
I found this fascinating. I thought that a lady there, in a single sentence, really summed up this election when she said, "We haven't given them a chance yet." I feel certain that this one sentence really sums up what's happened, that there's a great feeling that the Labour government's only had 17 months, and this is really the country deciding that they should be given another chance. I think it's as simple as that, in a single sentence.
Thank you very much indeed. Now let's go and join, if he's ready for us to go and join him. I don't know if he is. Kenneth Harris, who's got with him, as I can see, a group of trade union leaders. Kenneth Harris.
Well, I've got sitting with me here, from my left to right, first Sir William Carron, the president of the Amalgamated Engineering Union, the second biggest union in the country, and then next to him, the president of the Electrical Trade Union, Mr. Les Cannon, and on his left, Mr. Harry Nicholas, the acting general secretary of the Transport and General Workers Union, Mr. Cousins' union. So, William, during the campaign, one of the matters that has been much discussed has been the reform of the trade unions, and many people, rightly or wrongly, will be expecting this government, with its big majority, to push forward the reform of the trade union movement. Now, are you expecting that?
I wouldn't know on what basis the expectations have been made. Could I say that it's been made very, very evident and emphasised by the Conservatives that if they returned to power, that they would take steps which would be very adverse to our interests, and right up to this, up to last night. The leader of the Conservative Party had indicated that the aspects of trade unionism was one of the major facets of Conservative policy, and this has been most decisively rejected by the electorate. Individual Tories have made, I would say, vicious attacks upon certain unions, including mine, and certainly at least one of them has gone overboard, and so I think this is an indication that the country as such are not prepared to accept the Tory concept of vicious attacks on the unions. Now, we would expect our Labour friends, well, to help us, to help ourselves, which we're doing all the time, no more and no less than that.
Les Cannon?
I think in the first place that reform is necessary, both of trade unions and employers' organisations, and indeed many other types of organisations in the country. I would be strongly opposed to any legislation, if that's what you mean by the government pushing the unions. Certainly they need to be encouraged, and facilities for further amalgamations and improved forms of coordination and cooperation can be brought into being. The recent legislation, for example, to make easier amalgamations is one of the things the government can do. The danger about a government interfering, especially by legislation, is that if they make a mistake, you've now got a structure backed by law which is no more effective than the present one. I think reform is bound to take place as a result of the unions themselves grappling with their own problems.
What are you expecting, Mr. Harry Nicholas?
Well, the trade unions are free associations of working people. There's a great deal of legislation already applying to them. In fact, were it not for legislation, they wouldn't exist. Now it seems to me that the Tories overemphasize the need for legislation to almost put the trade unions out of business. And I think they made a tremendous error in overemphasizing that point of view. I think that the Labour Party will await the conclusions of the Royal Commission that's sitting at the moment, both on trade unions and employer organizations, and I stress the latter. And I would hope that they wouldn't start thinking about the introduction of legislation which would inhibit trade unions from doing the jobs that they've been set up to do.
Sir William, do you think a Royal Commission was necessary? Surely we knew what was wrong with the trade unions 16 months ago.
Well, I would want to emphasise what Harry Nicholas has just said, that the Royal Commission is looking at employers' organisations. Now, for a long, long time, the trade unions have been an open book. The faults that we have, and we have them, have been exposed and they've been emphasised and re-emphasised. One of the advantages of the Royal Commission is that we would hope that a spotlight would be turned on employers' organisations. I think that a Royal Commission is of value because it's going into these matters very, very deeply, and its conclusions would probably help us in doing what Leslie Cannon so rightly says, that we've got to
to move with the times and not be too slow to move with them.
Yes. Now, you, Les Cannon, you said that you thought that some reforms were required. What are the kind of things that you had in mind?
Well, I think that in the case of unions which associate with each other in a given industry, well, there's more than one union in an industry, at the moment we bring separate policies to bear on a meeting. I think we ought to give the representatives of the different unions in a given industry, negotiating in a given industry, a little more power to decide things as though they were an executive representing the workers of all the unions in that given industry. There are many ways of improving cooperation. I think, too, that what is necessary in order to increase the effective cooperation of trade unions is to revise the whole of the negotiating machinery, which involves, incidentally, a radical reform in many employers' organizations, and let me say, particularly the Engineering Employers Federation, which hasn't effected a single change in the way they deal with things in the engineering industry almost since their existence. Not a single change. The interesting thing is that you pose this question, was a Royal Commission on Trade Unions necessary? It's supposed to be a Royal Commission on Trade Unions and employers' organizations, but everybody forgets the latter point. But the fact is that the employers' organizations also need reform.
Mr. Nicholas, could I move now to the question of an incomes policy? Now, many people feel that the government has one incomes policy, the Transport and General Workers has another incomes policy. Mr. Cousins, of course, is the General Secretary of your union on leave of absence. He's also a member of the Cabinet. Now, do you feel that Mr. Cousins supports the Transport and General Workers Union incomes policy or the government's incomes policy?
Well, I think you ought to put that question to Mr. Cousins. What, in fact, is happening is that the General Executive Council of the Transport and General Workers Union is carrying out a policy that it has long ago determined to carry out. And we say that the existing incomes policy applies to far too few of the people in this country. There are far too many who can fall outside the net. My own view about it is, certainly the view of my executive too, is that the incomes policy is being applied to trade unionists who submit claims and other people, if you like, in the realms of management, in the professions, don't come into the net at all. So that therefore I think the quarrel is rather more about means and not ends. And again, we think that the policy is negative. It tells you what you mustn't do rather than the things that we ought to do. Remember, it's supposed to be a productivity prices and incomes policy, and productivity seems to have been completely forgotten over the past few months, and that's where we put the emphasis.
Mr. Nicholas, do you think that the government, with its new big majority, are going to push their version of an incomes policy and therefore possibly come more in conflict with your union than it has up to date?
No, I don't think so, because the manifesto already refers, and the manifesto on which the election was fought, refers to a national conference on productivity being held with the Prime Minister in the chair. It also talks about wages and productivity councils being set up. I think we're going to have a much more positive emphasis on these things to make the national cake bigger, rather than the purely negative angle of a prices policy which says you can't exceed this or you can't exceed that.
Sir William, do you feel that the government's big majority is going to have any effect on the pushing forward of the incomes policy as we know it at the moment?
Well, the incomes policy is part of the Labour government's plan. I think that the government will most probably put more bite into the plan now that it's on the grounds that it is with the majority that it has. And in consistency with that, I certainly don't think that the government will back down on its incomes policy.
What do you mean by more bite, Sir William?
Well, taking over from the original Conservative government's planning, which was hardly planning at all, it was really a series of reports, and then going into the field which set up the EDCs to go into detail into the various industries, there's been a vast mass of detailed information collected, and I think that the government now will be able to go on from that into more precise planning than hitherto has been the case.
Thank you, Sir William. Thank you, Les Cannon. Thank you, Harry Nicholas. Thank you. Now back to Cliff Michelmore.
Now I can see the rotunda, that complicated complex called the Bullring at Birmingham. And I think somewhere around the Bullring at Birmingham, Kenneth Alsop.
Well, in Birmingham, Labour made one gain in the Conservative marginal seat of Perry Barr, which gives them 9 of the 13 Birmingham seats. In fact, the Labour swing here was 6.7. But let's see what the individual Brummagem feel about this result in the bullring here at Birmingham. Sir, what do you expect from the certain next 5 years of Labour rule?
Well, I expect we'll have some proper government and that we'll be free of a lot of these restricted, unofficial strikes and things like that. And people are at last satisfied that for the next 5 years we can really get down to the things that really matter.
You're the market superintendent here. How do you think this is going to affect trade on the pavement level here in Birmingham?
Well, I think the bullring market has always been one of the best markets in the country, and the cost of living for people who shop in big shops could be cut down quite considerably if they came to the market a bit more and got more bargains in the market, if there are a lot of bargains to be got.
What do you think is the biggest single factor that brought about this result for Labour?
Well, I should say it's Wilson's attitude and putting it over. He make a good soapbox man, I think. You know, he's wrapped the article up well and the public have swallowed it.
You run a stall here in the market. Well, what do you sell?
I sell clothing, remnants and fabrics.
And how do you think it's going to affect you? In any way?
No, I don't think at all. Unless they interfere with the emigration. Because that, to me, is a great thing. I do terrific business with them. They're charming people, lovely people, and very good spenders.
I'd like to have a word with the gentleman over here, because it's been said in Birmingham that this result killed the immigration issue stone dead. How do you feel about this?
Well, I feel Labour has prospered because he has a great aim in the economic immigration scheme of equal equalization, which I pray and hope that he will give equal rights to the colored immigrants here. See?
What constituency are you in Birmingham?
Well, I'm in the... What do you mean?
Well, I mean, in your own constituency, was the racial issue brought up very much this time?
Well, they just pinch it a little bit, see? But I want them to give us equal rights in the government work offices, such as giving us a chance to join the police force as well. I wonder why they won't give us a chance, because I know that the colored immigrants here is capable enough to do that work and other works here.
Do you agree with that, madam?
Well, they have started, haven't they? I mean, there is one coloured person in the police force, and where one can get in, I think others will.
Only in Bristol, but he's not paid.
Ah, but you've got to start somewhere, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I quite agree.
Do you feel that the racial issue is an important one in Birmingham this time?
Well, I think it's a bit overrated. I think it's just something that they get their teeth into, and it's like a dog with a bone.
What do you expect from the next 5 years of Labour rule?
Well, I think given a chance that they can do. They've done a lot so far, in my opinion.
What about you? How did you vote this time?
Well, it's the first vote this year, and I voted Conservative, so I'm a bit disappointed.
Your first vote, you voted Conservative. Why was that?
Well, I think that the Labour can't do so much as the Conservative. I think the Conservatives did quite well when they were in. I don't think the Labour are any better.
So you feel very unhappy about this now, do you?
Yes.
What about a word with you? What do you feel about the results, Cliff?
Well, I think it's very good, and I think that in the next 5 years it'll bring the economy up to something like Sweden or Germany.
What's your particular trade or business?
Well, I'm a subcontractor, and I don't think Labour go much for that, you know, but still I voted for him.
You think it'll be bad for your particular business?
It will be, yeah, in the short run, but in the long run it'll be good for the country as a whole.
One last word now with you. What do you feel about this result?
Well, I feel that a large majority in the House of Commons by the Labour Party might be into detriment as far as democracy is concerned.
You mean you think they've got too many?
I think they've got too many. They may well ride roughshod over minorities, and this I think is a very, great constitutional danger. But otherwise, I am in support of such items as corporation tax, which I think will help capital accumulation in industry.
Thank you very much. Kenneth Alsop in Birmingham. Well, Kenneth Alsop in Birmingham was raising the immigration issue on which you want to work. David Butler.
it is quite plain that immigration, which was such a factor in a certain number of constituencies in the last election, has not been a factor in this election. The swing in the constituencies where there was a high level of immigration, where there was thought to be something of a coloured issue, was in fact slightly more to Labour than in other parts of the country. So this doesn't suggest that there was any adverse effect to Labour from the immigration issue. Secondly, there were 8 independent candidates standing on avowedly racialist, anti-immigrant platforms. They averaged only 4% of the vote, about half what the similar candidates averaged in the previous election. There was no instance whatsoever where you can suggest that immigration adversely affected the Labour result or indeed had a major effect on the result in any way.
You were also saying something about the assumption that people are making about that it is automatically 5 years.
Oh, well, this was simply that people keep on talking about 5 years. The Conservative Parliament of 59 to 64 was 5 years. That was unique. Almost every other parliament has been 4 years, occasionally 4.5, but 4 years has been the norm, and though it legally can be 5, I don't think one should get set the idea the next election will be in March 1971.
In fact, Prime Ministers on the whole prefer very much not to leave it to the last possible moment because it gives them no elbow room at all. They like to think in terms of 4.25 years, something like that.
And Mr. Wilson has just demonstrated the enormous advantage of the Prime Minister's power to choose the date of the election. It is a great advantage which he has certainly used very successfully today.
It is the great fairly political decision that a Prime Minister has to make on his own. It's a tremendous test, and Mr. Wilson has obviously timed it quite superbly from his own point of view.
And one of the great differences between British and American politics, where you have fixed election dates.
Just like people keep on talking about large majorities, I think they're really quite two different things here. It has been suggested that if the Labour Party got a large majority, this would greatly increase their left wing. There's a certain number of surveys that have been made of the new Labour MPs. On the whole, discount this. I think the Sunday Times did a survey into this. And certainly there's no evidence that there's going to be a great wave of left-wing MPs coming into the Labour Party.
The new MPs are in fact rather young men, and I think they're more significantly professional, technocratic sort of people who may be on the left, may be on the right. This is more significant fact about them than whether they're on the left or on the right. It's a different sort of parliament we're going to have quite appreciably by being a younger parliament.
The new Labour MPs, they're pure working class. One finds university lecturers, barristers, professional people, technocrats, as David said. The other point about large majority, though, which I think does cause some concern to any government with a majority of over 100, is that it does have an awful lot of backbenchers swanning around Westminster with not very much to do. And I know certainly in the 13 years of the Conservative government, they found that their party was most difficult to handle when they had their biggest majority. In the 59-64 Parliament, they used to look when they had a majority of 100. They used to look back nostalgically to the days when they only had a majority of 17 and everything was much quieter.
The Labour Chief Whip has, in fact, of course, said that he's got plans for study groups and other activities to keep the MPs busy and not making trouble.
I tell you one very important thing that is going to happen.
Tell us quickly, because we're going to have a display. Yes, go on.
Well, there's going to be a tremendous move to reform Parliament to get the committee system, American committee system going. We can talk about that later.
We'll have a look at that. Now, what we want to do, we've been here this morning for just over 4 hours here, haven't we? We have indeed. Good morning to anyone who just joined us. Almost good afternoon from where we are, really. We think it'd be useful at this time to go through all these changes so far. Here they are. They will just go by on your screen so that you can see them if you've missed them before.
These are the seats that Labour won in all the 461 results that declared overnight. The two Bristol seats, which were expected, in fact, to go at the last election. Chislehurst, that's Pat Hornsby Smith's seat. Conway, a bit unexpected. Exeter, that was the first seat. Hampstead, that was Henry Brooke's seat. He put that one up twice. Harrow East, that was Commander Courtney's seat. Lancaster, Humphrey Berkeley's seat. Lewisham North, Christopher Chataway's seat. Leighton, that's where Patrick Gordon Walker won. Who with us earlier, you will have seen him being interviewed.
And Christopher Chataway, incidentally.
But Plymouth Devonport was just held. Preston North, that's Julian Emery out. Reading, Peter Emery. And the famous Smethwick revenge by Labour. Stretford, the chairman of Ways and Means. Uxbridge, Charles Curran. York, Charles Longbottom. And that's Roderick Byrne, the deputy chairman of Ways and Means. And here's the gain from the Ulster Unionists in Ireland, in Belfast West. These are the unexpected Liberal gains. Dr. Michael Winstanley in Cheadle. And Richard Wainwright, the win from Labour at the Cairn Valley.
There you are, the changes so far. David Butler, a quick comment.
There are 5 seats due to come which are almost certain to join that list. Bedfordshire South, High Peak, South West Norfolk, Monmouth and Rushcliffe. On the form so far, those all have over 90% chance of joining them. Then there are about 7 or 8 seats which we should be very much watching for, which are around 50% chance of moving. About even chance of they're going or not going. Some of them probably will go, so we end up with somewhere 99, 101, 103 Labour overall majority.
We've got these East Anglia seats, which are always fascinating because they invariably produce very close results, and often the other way.
Well, I know where we're going now, to Belfast, to Holland and Wolff, on top of that great giant oil rig. I don't know if Bob Coulter's still on top there. Are you still up there?
Here in Belfast, the question, as always, is what does it all mean in terms of men and jobs? As an economist, Dr. Black, how do you feel?
Well, I don't think there's any reason for alarm in Northern Ireland over this result. We now have a Labour government, a strong Labour government at Westminster committed to national planning. We have a unionist government at Stormont committed to regional planning, and the thing to do is to ensure that they have the closest possible relationships to get on with the job. There are 2 issues that I think might be important in the future. The future of Shorten Holland, the aircraft producers here, and the future of Holland and Wolff producing ships. Geddes has left Holland and Wolff a bit out on a limb. I think this is likely to produce a very substantial problem for management in Belfast. And I think that possibly the relations between management and Labour will be the key to the solution of this problem in the future.
That takes me over to our friends. Jimmy Graham, you're chairman of the Works Committee at Short Brothers in Harland.
That's correct.
A prominent union leader, Mr. Brian Graham, union leader with Data. Now, this whole challenge between management and Labour, how do you see it coming?
Well, I feel that the incoming government, the relationship between it and the trade union movement will be dominated by the incomes policy and how they apply their incomes policy. Secondly, in Northern Ireland, of course, our position, especially that in aircraft and in shipbuilding, will be dominated, I would say, by a position of change from one job to another, retraining. This might be easier in England, where there would be relative overemployment. Here, viewed against a background of 6.2% unemployment, the question of change means that there's fear, insecurity in people's minds about the future with regard to work, etc.
Mr. Graham, you have a design problem always in Short Brothers and also in Harland and Wolff. Whether you can keep your design team together if the whole thing becomes so specialised.
This is one of the problems of the proposals contained in the Geddes Committee report on shipbuilding, in that the possibility for centralised design raises particular problems for our members. The proposal to have a specialisation in relation to the type of ships we build also raises serious problems for our members.
The unions are coming a long way towards this already, have they not, with management? You're kind of getting more mature and mellow with it as the years go.
Let me put it this way. I think that we're learning to live with one another. For people outside of industry who don't really know the background of it, piecework prices, changes in techniques, shifting people from one job to another, there's a tremendous amount of massive work which goes on, which the general public knows nothing at all about. And generally speaking, relationship, and speaking personally about my own firm, we've learned to live with one another. We have our differences, but we get over them.
One of the key things, of course, is this diversification, both for Shorts and for the whole country. Now, will this be helped at all by national planning as you see it?
Well, I think it will be. I think that the view that the Labour government has taken is that if an old traditional industry goes down, we must try to find something to put in its place.
Yeah.
I think we've got to strive to do this as much as possible in Northern Ireland.
You don't see any danger in this grouping across the water, in shipbuilding, for example?
I think that we've got to watch this very carefully. We must, I think, protect ourselves against the possibility of Northern Ireland being left out on a limb in shipbuilding in the same way as we've been left a bit out on a limb in aircraft production.
Where can the government step in here with direct action?
Well, they can make the maximum sort of representations to Westminster to ensure that we get all that we're entitled to.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. This is Bob Coulter in Belfast.